Okay, cool. So, good evening, everybody. I hope you had a good day. Mine was exhausting, but hey, I've got a bit of energy left for you, so let's start. Welcome to the Power of Pseudo-Elements. Before I start, don't bother take a screenshot or whatever. I will share a PDF of this presentation. Okay, so just focus. Also, I will try to read your questions along the presentation and answer it directly or later. I don't know yet. Okay, so I'm Geoffrey. I'm a lead designer, sometimes UX designers, depending on who is asking. I work at Foyer Group with a team of 10 designers. If you are a client to Foyer and don't like the application, tell me later. I'm almost a former front-end developer. Yep, I say almost because I can't quit. I'm kind of an addict. So here is an overview of what I'm going to talk about. Also, tell me if you have a kind of a delay between what I'm saying and the slide. It happens sometimes. So I'm going to define pseudo-elements. Then I will talk about the reason I bring back this topic on the table. I will pass by the basics of using them to put everybody on the same page. Then I will show you some fun and sometimes useful demonstration and code. And to finish, I will show you the future. Okay, let's go. What are those pseudo-elements? So in CSS, there are two kinds of pseudo-elements. There are the ones acting like a new HTML in your code. And pseudo-classes, they help you with targeting more precisely elements of your document. A bit of code. Here is an example of pseudo-class. So you have two paragraphs. I target the first one with a pseudo-class. Okay, it's like I added a class on the first element. So first child here is a pseudo-class because it can be replaced by a class on one or multiple elements in your HTML code. For pseudo-elements, let's take this simple paragraph now, and I'm going to make the first letter bold. Okay, it's like I added a span element within my HTML to style it. Okay, so first letter is a pseudo-element because it replaces somehow an HTML element. That's the difference between a pseudo-element and a pseudo-class. To keep this talk simple, I'm going to talk about before and after those two pseudo-elements, but they are not alone in the pseudo-element universe. You have to know it, but there are also first letter, first line, selection, extracts, there are, and also new ones, but I will talk about those at the end of the talk, okay? What about those specific pseudo-elements before and after? They generate content, literally. We will see where, what, and how afterwards. They are in the family of tree-abiding pseudo-elements, meaning that they can't create new elements outside the target element. It's kind of technical, but no worries, you don't have to remember that. There are other kind of pseudo-element families like typographic pseudo-elements, like the first letter. We see it just before. First line, which allows you to style typographic stuff. Okay, and you have highlight pseudo-elements like selection, which allows you to style what the user highlights on the page, for instance. Before and after pseudo-elements are pretty simple. It generates the content before or after the content of the target. Almost all known CSS can be applied on this new content. For instance, the dash or numbers before a list item is generated content. Not with before or after, but still it's a generated content. I will come back to all of this with code and visual example, no worries. So Why are we gonna talk about it? Yes, tell me why. Please tell me you've got the Tell Me Why song in your head. Tell me why. You're right, I'm digging up an old topic. Pseudo-elements exist since 2003 and are in candidate recommendation since 2011. I like to talk about all things while everybody else is talking about grid layout, flexbox, client functions, because pseudo-elements are either unknown or underestimated, but it's not the only one misunderstood concept. Sorry. For instance, even the concept of classes seems to be unknown. In this tweet, Max asks people what's the color of the text of those divs just by reordering the classes in HTML. So it's an example, but most people are wrong here. The right answer is both blue, okay? So I can totally imagine that showing you all CSS properties with demonstration in code will be useful for everyone at some point. And even Rachel Andrew said, don't forget that all CSS still exists and is useful. You don't need to use something fancy for every effect. It's wise. Okay, so now I spent a bit of time on the context. Let's dive into the concrete. The syntax, for instance, is quite common CSS, okay? It's, so you have your selector, a P here, followed by double colons and your pseudo-element, and here it's a P4. Content property with an empty string as value at least. You can have a lot of things. You can keep that in mind. I will use it a lot, the empty one. Good thing to know if you cross paths with old code, pseudo-element and pseudo-classes syntax did share the same unique colon mark for a while. Now, pseudo-elements have to be declared with double colons to be distinguishable, even if modern browsers support both. I talk about before and after, but you would ask, okay, before and after what exactly? Do you recall the box model of an element? We have the content box where lays the very content of an element. Around that, we have the padding box, which allows spacing between the content and the border box, then the border box. And to finish, we have the margin box. Just checking quickly if there is something in the chat. CSS, yeah. Okay, good. Don't hesitate if you have any question. Okay, so before and after are not going far. They land right before and after the elements within a content box. It can be after or before a text node or a bunch of children. Sorry for the French here. Slides were in French before this talk. The pseudo element here lays next to the text node. And yeah, sorry for the Latin, but I think you get it right. Anyways, here is what Firefox show me when I write the previous code. So, this code. As you can see, the before and after are really close to the text content. Good things with browser now, you can easily target a pseudo element within the DOM to debug your CSS. So when you target it, you have the CSS on the CSS panel. The only thing you have to declare in CSS is at least a content, an empty content, to make the pseudo element appear in the DOM. So you can create pseudo elements on everything unless it's a replace content element. A replace content in HTML is kind of when new content takes the place of your HTML declaration, like image, iframe, video, embed, etc. Inputs elements are not supposed to be replace content. Those are widgets, but it works the same, meaning that pseudo element doesn't work with it, except some bugs. Here are the main known values for content. So I put a declaration on the top right. The left column is for resetting your content. So usually you don't really use it. The one interesting in the middle column, I'll detail it a bit later. And the right one is for typography, mostly needed for block codes or cite elements to replace the open and close quote characters. So you don't really need those neither. So the string value can be used that way. You can have an empty value. It's the value I use the most. It does nothing by default. The second code simply add a piece of text. You can also inject a Unicode and use it as an icon. Of course, the prop example doesn't make sense. You don't want to push text strings via CSS. It's not really maintainable nor accessible unless you just want it decorative. So I will start with some content with some value, for content. The URL function allows you to load an image. The issue is that it really behaves weird as fuck. On the bottom right, my initial text. Okay, really on the bottom right. This big shuriken is a 512 pixel wide image. As you can see, the 8 reserved for the image is still 16, but it doesn't care. So I decided to gently ask my pseudo-element to resize a little bit. Apparently, it still doesn't care. Okay, so the little square is on the top left now. And then I tried with an inline flex model. It worked, but it worked only for Firefox, so it's a bug. The only right solution here is to use a background image. As I said, you can do whatever you want with it in CSS, so avoid URL function and use background images instead. It's just URL is buggy, too buggy. The attribute function allows you to get the string value of an attribute. You can use all the attributes you want. In this example, I target the links with an href long attribute, and I put it right after my link. Don't pay attention in the colors on the example. The string added in black is part of the link, okay? Just to show you the content value. The counter value offers you the ability to generate string based on the CSS counter. If you didn't know that we can build counter in CSS, I will show you later how we can use it. So there. Now, know that you already use it, okay? I will talk to all developers before the screens now. I don't know if you are part of the all developers. Do you remember the clear fix solution with this ugly div? Maybe you already met this version with a single class instead. So it's almost the same. The solution equal to the previous one, but you do it directly in CSS. Because floating elements has been added by CSS, so you should fix it with CSS or clear it with CSS. But who cares? Nobody uses floating anymore unless you put your hands into dirty old code. Same for font icon. You may already know this HTML syntax. It simply adds a before pseudo element with a precise Unicode value and the font face with the right icon font to replace the Unicode by an icon. Okay, so it's done with pseudo elements. Last time I gave this talk, it was a workshop and people really liked it. So I invite you to download the folder with some exercises in it. My next demonstration will give you the solutions, but you will be able to rework on it later if you want to. I suppose when we learn with some practice, it's always better. So keep in mind that you can redo the exercise later. So this link on the bottom right is still on the bottom right. Okay, I'll keep it for now. Like that, you can visit it. No worries, take your time. So here is an example of an exercise. With this one, this is one div container. I will ask you to create this shape, okay, within the div. So you can, whether you want to code or just imagine the solution, here are two possible outcomes. Okay, you can write the solution on the paper just to imagine how you will work on it, or you can write down a piece of CSS code, like this solution, for instance. I suggest you to just follow the next slide as a demonstration and do the exercise at home if you want to play with that. Otherwise, this talk is going to last 3 hours. So one of the exercises is that one. For one of your projects, you've been asked to add a print function to some pages. But when you print pages, links are not visible or actionable anymore. Yeah, obvious. Use pseudo-elements to display URL between brackets. Okay. The basic idea is to target all the links that are not internal page anchors that starts with a hash. The circumflex accent allows us here to say anchors with href attributes starting with HTTP. See it like a kind of regular expression. But maybe all the other links are internal links. So by default, I will add my domain before the attribute value. And of course, I have to wrap all of that in a media print query. In the real life, you will have to take into account other kind of protocol like tell, mail2, or simply internal page anchors starting with a hash symbol. Okay, I hope the demonstration was okay for you. Another fun exercise is this one. One of the pages on your website displays a list of files in different formats. Propose a CSS code to help distinguish the multiple extensions. So you don't. Oh, thanks Anna for sharing the link. So if you have any question, go for it. So in the folder you have downloaded, if you already downloaded it, I already load a font icon for you. So here for all my links, I declare a before element with a default icon. Then when my link ends with PDF, I change the color of the icon and the icon. And same for the doc files. Pretty simple, isn't it? Another fun exercise is more typographical example here, titles numbering. So here is the example with the counters. So try to focus on this one. So you are in a big document with a long text like a thesis or something. You want to bring structure by numbering all the titles. Use pseudo-element to add numbers before the titles. So we'll be using the counters function and the attributes related to it. First of all, we have to create counters. Okay. So here, each time I cross an H1 in my DOM, I want to reset my H2 counter. Same thing with my H3 counter. It will be resetted after each H2. Now I write my number before H2 by using the counter function and the before pseudo-element, of course. I don't know if you're familiar with the upper Roman style, but it's like it's the same than the list style values for ordered lists in HTML, the OL. Of course, I need to increment H2 value also. And we do the same for H3, but here we use two counter functions. The first one to get our H2 and the second one for H3. Okay, and then I decided to add some styling to get the counters out of the flow when screen width is big enough. Another one, no question yet? Fabrice, are all of these demos supported by all command brothers, or are there some limitations? At the moment, it's really well supported, but I've got some slide at the end with all of the support. So I will go through it quickly, but no worries, it's really, really well supported at the moment. Thank you, Anna. Nested links. You want to make the whole card clickable, but also the author and category links actionable. Use pseudo-elements to solve this issue. Pro tips. Absolute and relative positions are your best friends. Let's go. You will see it's not that hard. So here I decided to use the link on the title. So there is a link on the title also, and extend its area by using a pseudo-element. So I will extend the area of the link to make it bigger. I can position my before pseudo-element in the absolute because I know that my article has a relative position already. Don't forget that an absolute positioning is made using the first parent with the position as a reference. So here the pseudo-element is represented by my filettish layer. Then to push the links on the layer over the pseudo-element, a simply position relative will do the job. It works with position relative alone just because all my links are next siblings to my title link. If it wasn't the case, I would have to use the index with one value. And for a better micro interaction styling, you can use a box shadow either on article over or link focus before pseudo-element. As you can see in the video, I don't know if you have the little video with the shadow growing, but while hovering, the state of the link on the title, the underline, changes. That means our pseudo-element works. And we did it on our design system in order to match recommendation in terms of ergonomy and accessibility. We make the clickable area bigger using the same technique, but instead of using a 0 value for bottom, top, bottom, right, left, we used a negative bigger value, like -8 or 16, I don't remember, pixels everywhere. So, but we had to use a pointer event property on Firefox to make it clickable for some reason, but it worked really well. I love the counter trick. So nice, fancy. Yeah. Thanks, Steph. Paper stack effect. A bit of fun with this stack effect. This effect is used sometimes to represent a pile of elements you gathered on, or you are drag and dropping, for instance, when you're moving things around the interface. Recreate this effect with pseudo-elements. Okay, how can we do that? So first, you need a kitten, not use that. But that's not all. You also need to style the first item this way. Okay, so position relative to make this element a new reference for a pseudo element. Remember that relative positioning is a real helper for everything you are going to position in absolute. A bit of padding, background, and shadow to create the little photography effect. I put the same background and shadow onto my pseudo element, and I give them a strictly same size, padding included, than the stack, the dot stack element, thanks to the absolute position and a 0 to all 4 directions. I need the index to -1 to put the pseudo element behind the kitten. Otherwise, it will be just over the kitten. Then I simply rotate the pseudo element. So -10 degrees for the first one and -5 degrees for the second. As I applied a transition property on the pseudo element, I can even create this effect by changing the transform value on over. Good. Another one, burger icon. So for the mobile version of your menu, you want to create this fancy animated effect. Know that you can do it with a single span and pseudo elements. How does it work? The menu button selector here is for the entire menu button, so text included, not only the icon. Inline block display and padding top allows me to prepare a bit of space for the icon, so just above the icon. The text, sorry. Let's take care now of our icon. It's a span, so I need to make it a block of some kind. Here it's got my screen. More here. Then I make a bigger selector, a big selector to give the 3 elements the same weights, height, background, and border radius, and prepare them to be animated. Because in the demonstration it was animated. So I used transition to prepare it, but for the moment my pseudo elements don't really exist. And you follow here, so I suppose you know why it doesn't work. It's because we don't have a content yet. So now I make the pseudo element alive and put one at -9 pixel, another one at 9 pixel from their original place. I get that, and now when the button is activated, represented in my code by .on selector, the middle dash is made transparent, and the two others are slightly rotated and translated to form this close icon. Oh, I didn't see your question. Okay. Just a little check and use it. Oh yeah. Cool. So there is some links shared on the chat. Custom radio buttons now. Create custom radio buttons thanks to pseudo elements. Make it funny or just bigger for better usability and accessibility. You did always dream about it, right? Tell me you always did dream about it. So to do that, the HTML is pretty simple. One paragraph which wraps one input radio and one label. The important thing you have to remember is to always link the input and the labels together by giving them the same value for ID and for attribute. For is the name of the attribute. Okay. So they're put together on the code. CSS part now. First thing, we create our new positioning reference relative again. You're used to it now. Then I prepare my two pseudo elements by positioning them regardless their size. So I use top 50% and translate y50 -50% to have them positioning centered. Regarding the paragraph. So they will be used to create our radio buttons. Then I create the box being checked, the circle. The original radio button is hidden thanks to the background. Okay, so I've got a white background. It makes it still accessible for screen readers and keyboard navigation, interesting for keeping a good level of accessibility. And I use pixels here, but I encourage you to use EM or REM units for better scalability. It's easier to understand with pixel at first. And finally, I create a little dot to represent the selected item. And this one is animated from scale 0 to scale 1 when checked. So animated thanks to transition again, and you can see the transform y minus 50 and scale 0 to scale 1. The second CSS selector is where the magic happens. I selected the checked input to target the direct sibling to modify the after pseudo element. And we are done. A little visual effect. Reproduce this fractured text effect with the things you know now about pseudo elements. Inspired from an article by Mandy Michael. I really recommend you follow her on Twitter and CodePen also. She has a lot of cool demonstration. So this HTML is my starting point. I use a data heading attribute to duplicate the text and use it as pseudo element content value. I used a data attribute to avoid duplicating the text for accessibility reason. Indeed, remember the attribute function you can use to render a text value, string value in your pseudo elements. So here it is. I position the two pseudo elements the same way. And prevent things from overflowing. You will see why now. I put a salmon color on the pseudo element and the after pseudo element and transform it a bit and give it 48% height. Okay. That's why I needed to hide the overflowing part to be able to truncate the text. And now I do exactly the same with the other pseudo elements, but this one is here to hide the upper part of the text. So the browser tries to smooth a bit your text when always okay, and sometimes the smoothing is kind of debatable. So I needed to use a text shadow to avoid having a gray halo around the white text. And if you feel like a ninja, you can even animate it. So let's go further. Do you remember this URL syntax, the one with the weird big shuriken effect? Don't use it. Okay, but if you do, know that you can add an alternative text, like you are supposed to do it with a alt attribute in HTML. You're also able to add kind of a content stack with fallbacks, meaning here that if your browser doesn't support MOV file, for instance, it fallbacks to the PNG. Then it fall back to the text, but I suppose every browser supports PNG now. Nothing related, but you can also create this sort of photo filters with pseudo elements and image blending. And no worries if you don't follow everything on the next slide. There is a demo link for every demonstration, and remember that you will have access to the PDF of the presentation. Bravo, Dominique. Thanks. I don't know why, but thanks. So you take a dog this time, not a kitten. You apply magical CSS filter like contrast, brightness, saturate. So if you didn't know that you can apply CSS filters like this, you can do it. So let's check the documentation. It's filter. Then you take another image source with a black background. It's usually better. You put it on your puppy. And you apply a mixed blend mode on it to create a radiant effect. It's magic. CSS gram made by Yuna try to recreate the Instagram filters with pseudo-element, blending mode, and filters. Okay, so you can do an Instagram filter with CSS only. Another funny demo, but really useful sometimes. On a project where the code was untouchable, I was only allowed, it's a true story, to use CSS, not even JavaScript. The grid system was in Flexbox, and the row design put the first item on the top of the row alone. So one pseudo element, and it was done. So how to do so? I asked the first element to be order -1. So in the Flexbox logic, you have the order property that allows you to reorder things. So I can be sure it will always be the first one. If it's -1, it's always the first one. Oh, I got a question. How are these CSS filters compatible with Internet Explorer 9? Why are you asking, Tony? I think no, it doesn't. 11. I can't remember. I think no. But I've got a table with compatibility at the end, so we'll go through it. No worries. We'll check together. So to do so, yeah, I asked the first element to be the first one, and really the first one. Then I create a pseudo element in the row parent. It took its place next to the first element. I asked him gently to cover 100%. And voila, I just hide it. So you can also build really advanced shadows using both pseudo elements and bug shadow declaration. I think I've got something for you. Can I? No, I can't. I can go through the demonstration, but you have the link bit.ly/CSS shadows. You've got a small X-ray effect on the previous one. Sorry. So snakes effect like this one. You don't have the animation. Yes, you could use an SVG, but it's a talk about CSS pseudo element, you know. So I did demonstration with pseudo elements. Once decomposed, those animated elements are really simple to build. One moving dot, some rows, and we're done. The same, you've got a little code pen about it. I don't know if Steph is here. Yes. When Stephanie redesigned her portfolio, I built all the animation using pseudo elements, almost all the animations. So you can check directly on the website if you want. And for the same website, I made this destroyed menu icon and animation. You know how to build the icon now, so you can create the effect really easy. And yeah, you've got a demonstration on CodePen with a slow motion on it. And just to show off, I reproduced the lightbox effect in CSS with pseudo element and element function. It's another weird function, but it's working only on Firefox. And you can really do a lightbox effect only with pseudo elements. And it's even keyboard accessible, so I can switch up. Look. And you really have to think it hard to be able to do that, but you can do it, but you also should not do it. Okay, it's not accessible, not really. And it's not compatible. Yet another fractured text effect, but easier to make thanks to clip path and polygon value. Again, it's a demonstration by Mandy Michael. I don't know if I told you, but you should follow her. And it's animated because she is a ninja. So pseudo elements before for an image. Yeah, I kind of lied to you because you can create a pseudo element on images, but only when they are not loaded. Indeed, the browser use it to display the alt content value. There is a bridge, so I used it to customize before and after pseudo elements when images are not loaded. Cool. So the support for this feature is not completely good, but it's kind of okay. It's really a complement for your website too. So some advantages you should agree with now. Pseudo elements, they allow you to generate content quickly. They allow to improve usability and readability. They allow you to create purely visual stuff. And mastered, they allow you to fine-tune everything, even a green system. Alain, you are following like a chief. Thanks. So quickly, I go through support. Pseudo elements are pretty much perfectly supported. Okay. CSS transition 2. Blend mode a bit less, but you know, Internet Explorer, you should drop it if you can. Same for filters. So sorry, Dominique. Pointer event is okay, almost everywhere. Clip path for the second fractal text effect demo, a bit less, but it's really good. Elements, I told you, it's Firefox only, but you know what? You really don't need it. A bit of accessibility now. The support for reading the content of the pseudo element is pretty good. The only issue seems to be Internet Explorer, again, the 11, on Windows with JAWS and NVDA. Let's drop Internet Explorer. Edge is on Chromium now. I've got 4 slides on the future of pseudo-element content, but it's mostly for print purpose or rich text content. So if you don't care, you can go for a 5-minute break. Otherwise, follow me till the end. So, for example, this value target counter allows you to generate a counter related to a targeted element. The content here take 2 parameters, the href content as target and number of page as template. Okay. Another future ability is to use text targets, but here the content is generated from the text within the targeted element. So for the 2 previous functions, the goal is to target an element and extract its content in a way or another to use it in our pseudo element. Okay, so it's literally extract content targeted. A more graphical function is leaders that allows you to create a pattern to visually link together, content together. Here with a dot pattern and in combination with target counter function. Okay, so it's really for print purpose. Last, but my favorite one, the function content will allow you to generate a string content based on the content of the target. Remember our fractal text? We could do it without our data heading. So we used a data heading attribute, and we could have done that with just content function. So last one, other pseudo elements coming, or some are already here. We've got some other tree embedding pseudo elements like marker, the pseudo element before the list item, placeholder, the suggestion within a form field. We've got also highlight pseudo elements, inactive selections, for instance. It's the same as selection, but when inactive. Okay. And we've got spelling and grammar error for text marked as wrong by the user agent. So we will be able to style all of that. Some resources that helped me already, and I'm sure I can help you. There is also Rachel Andrew website and Mandy Michael Twitter, if I didn't mention it already. And that's all. If you have any question, I don't bite so far. So any question on this talk or on any other CSS feature, I'm available here now, or on Twitter or in the chat.
So I have one quick question.
Yeah.
As of today, how often did you use pseudo-elements in production, in projects that you are working on?
Always. For styling effect, like little shapes here and there. For in our design system, for instance, for everything that is related to touchable area, tapeable area, you can make it bigger, but the visual aspect is always the same. But you can have a halo around it that is tapeable. So yeah, I think every day, almost every day when I code.
So this helps you most of the time in the desktop-oriented products or mobile?
Everything, mobile and desktop. You know,
I see.
CSS works everywhere now.
Great, thank you. I don't know if everyone is okay. If you have questions, you can turn on your mic and just ask the question or type the text.
I will quit the presentation. I'm still sharing, right?
If not, then it's okay. Dominic is typing.
And just to show you the effect I talked about here. It's advanced drop shadows. You can see how it's built by using the X-ray function. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen.
So we have a question. For a layout purpose, do you use grid, for instance?
I use Flexbox most of the time.
Okay.
Because we don't have a lot of complex layouts in our application, and we started with Flexbox 2 years ago, so we keep it.
Okay, cool.
It's not too soon. You can really use it now. You can something like 80% of the clients supporting it. Maybe more than that.
Okay, thanks a lot, Geoffroy. We are going to continue. Next speaker is Maxime Salnikov. And today he will ask you, Max, to introduce the subject. That will be the most correct way from the reliable source. And the microphone is yours.
Hello, 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 dear developers. Hello, great LuxembourgJS community. My great pleasure to speak for your crowd. I planned to visit your beautiful country to see you in person, but unfortunately today online is the only way for us to communicate. But it's still on my roadmap. Right after it becomes possible and safe for me and for you to meet in person, I will do this, and I will prepare a special talk exclusively for your user group. Today, I'm going to present about background services, about what do we have in the modern browsers related to this functionality. And to present, I need to share my slides, and I don't see this magic button to share the screen in the UI of big blue button. So could you please help me to find it? Oh yes, it's here. Clicking this one, share. Running, yes, here we are. Let's talk about what's available in today's browsers and how to use these powers or maybe superpowers for good to delight our users, customers, clients. My name is Maxim Salnikov. I live in Norway, in Oslo, and work for Microsoft. I care about developer relations, mainly focused on our cloud offering called Azure. In my spare time, I organize developer communities and developer events. I do it for many years. I started to do this long time before I officially started as a developer relations specialist. So this is my, let's say, full-time hobby and my main passion. And for example, I organize similar user group dedicated to front-end development here in Oslo, plus a bunch of other meetups, and maybe you heard about conferences I run called NG Vikings and Mobile Era. The best way for us to stay connected these times is Twitter, and here you see my handle called WebMaxRU. I tweet mainly about web platform, about progressive web apps, service worker, and its family APIs. So let's stay connected there. And of course, anytime feel free to ask me all the questions about topic I presented and all the rest about PWA. Let's talk about cutting edge of the web APIs, and let's talk about new upcoming possibilities we will have there on the web front-end part of the story. Something cool is coming to reduce the gap between what web can do and what native code for particular platform can do. For example, we as web front-end developers have the tools, or will have the tools soon, to keep our applications and the data these applications consume always fresh, completely without any interaction needed from user side or from our side. Something that we have as a background updates, for example, on mobile native platforms. Same goes for all kinds of notifications. We might be able to build completely web front-end based alarm clocks applications, for example. So that means that to receive some form of notification, our user doesn't need to be connected to the internet or have our application tab open or even browser open. So exactly like again we have on mobile native devices. Same with network resilience. So why not to have the possibility to stop thinking about, are we connected to the internet at this moment to propagate data, or we can safely say to our user, regardless of your connection at this particular time point, your data will be delivered to the server the next available time point. And all this happens, as I mentioned, without any extra actions needed from the user side. Like, it's not about sitting and hitting refresh to keep your app updated. It's not about having your application always running to have some interactions there. No, it all goes completely in background. And what is the background service after all? This is part of the browser, which is helping us to run our code. Of course, we are talking here about JavaScript, right? It's the only language we can run in the browsers so far. Run this code with some very specific moments. First, this code, which is part of background task, runs in parallel thread. The same story we have in web workers, for example, but there are many more differences. For example, it has a completely separate life from the life of our main application thread. So how do we start and stop our main front-end JavaScript application? That's simple, right? User opens the tab and, for example, framework starts to build UI, etc., etc. Then the user closes the tab and everything disappears from memory, from the screen, from everywhere, right? But once we registered this, let's call them for now pieces of our code, which will be part of background services, they start live separately, and their life doesn't depend on the open tab or even open visible part of the browser. I'm emphasizing here that visible part of the browser, but these days pretty much every browser tries to reside in memory even after you click the close button, at least running as a background application. I believe it's turned on by default in majority of the modern browsers. So we can say that we can run our JavaScript code with closed browser. Sounds quite interesting. So if these pieces of code start their work without opening the tab, right? What invokes them? What wakes them up? Events. And yeah, it's one more difference from, for example, web workers or our main application thread. So looking at these 3 points, I have a strong association of background services with phantoms, with ghosts. Just imagine our application is dead when user closed the tab, but still pieces of the code from our app, they wake up, they get new life, not that long though, and so they behave like phantoms, and browser behaves like a ghost house. Talking about events, what kind of events do we have to wake our code up, code as a part of background services? Variety of events are related to the network. First, connection state, for example, when we go from offline to online, and then different events about operation status. If, for example, this fetch succeeded or failed or in progress or aborted, we can catch all these events and run corresponding code. Next family of events is time-based. Again, different scenario available. We'll go through this in detail soon. And of course, we can wake this code up from the signal from our backend. Of course, in that case, user has to be online, right? And here we are talking about push notifications. It's not a secret at all that the code we are talking about, code which is part of background services, lives in the service worker. Basically, this is the only place where we can put the code which is running completely independent from the life cycle of the main application. Only in service worker we can have the code which is running without our application open, without visible part of the browser is open. And just to visualize what kind of events from where and what kind of reaction do we have, I have this slide. So first, we can send events very explicitly from the application itself, if the application is ever running. Next, browser can also send these signals to the service worker. And the operating system, for example, when operating system decides that connection state changed, proxied via the browser, it sends events to our service worker, and the outer world, the internet, can also send events to the service worker. What's next? How can we react on our side when service worker received something? And what kind of possibilities do we have here? What kind of code can we write? First, we can organize bi-directional channel with the application. For example, if we want to update something in in UI based on push notification we received from our backend, just an example. But of course, for that case, the application should be opened, right? If the application is not open, we can just launch the browser and open the tab with our application. So this will look like regular opening of the browser with a particular tab, and then we can organize this channel. So that's absolutely possible. Or maybe we don't need to launch the whole browser to spin up the full application. Maybe we just want to show the notification. It's absolutely possible. And maybe the most exciting part of all the story, that we can run custom code we write as developers, completely invisible for the user. Like no launching browser, no showing notification, nothing, but something happens under the hood, something that we wrote. Maybe this is most powerful and most scary part of all background services, but we'll go through this in details in a few minutes. Back to background services themselves. Where can we find the current list of them? That's super simple to do. Open any Chromium-based browser. We mainly speak today about browsers based on Chromium, but we'll again have this discussion a bit later. Open DevTools, go to Application tab, and somewhere in the left, in the bottom, you'll find this list. Background services. Of course, this list is here not to just list these great APIs, but to help us with debugging, testing, and developing in general these services. This piece of functionality of DevTools allows us to get the information about all these events related to background services our service worker receives. And it even allows us to record these events, if I remember correctly, for up to 3 days. And it simplifies our life as developers a lot, because these events are something quite challenging to test, and again, rely on this table. Let's briefly go through all these points, and let's give more attention to a couple of them. Payment handler. First unique part of this API is that users can get service worker installed on the fly. That's quite exotic scenario when users can can get service worker installed even without visiting the origin this service worker registered against. There are lots of course, limitations and the considerations, but still this is something interesting about this UI, or API, sorry. And this API is helping us to build web-based payment services. So the scenario is quite niche. It mainly applicable to, mainly interesting to the companies which are building these payment services. So maybe we skip this for now, enough details. Background sync is quite simple API in terms of it has only one event for one particular scenario, when the device of our user goes from offline to online state. That's pretty much it, what this API can do for us. What's next? Next, we as developers have to take care about the corresponding code. How can we utilize this knowledge for good? And main scenarios I've seen for this API is to repeat failed requests. And by failed, I mean mainly requests done while the user was offline. So just imagine we can easily build web front-end based Twitter or Instagram clone, and to allow users to write and post a tweet, and to process photo and post this photo to the feed while they are offline. Of course, there is no magic channel to the internet, right? But we can provide the smooth transition, and we can, for example, inform folks that unfortunately we are offline now, but the the picture you posted will be delivered to the network when possible. And again, thanks to the power of service worker, at this moment, when it becomes possible, the user doesn't have to have the application open, right? So they can close this and forget about this, but the data will be delivered. Nothing unique here compared to how mobile, for example, native code do. And again, web is catching up here. Background fetch is about detaching something and attaching something. So first, it separates data fetching process from the life of the main application. What do I mean here? Compared to the regular fetch method, which stops working right after user again closes the tab or the browser, background fetch continues to work. Furthermore, it shows UI to the user, which allows the user to pause, to cancel the download or upload. So here it behaves like the regular download organized by anchor tag when we just refer to some resource, for example, MP3 file or some video file. But it's also different from this regular download because the bytes we downloaded are available for our front-end application. So the resource, the file, doesn't become the part of operating system like in the case of regular download. So it's not resides in download folder. We as developers have full control over this, what to do. And for example, we can build web front-end based podcast applications where we can give the possibility to preload some episodes and to store them, for example, in IndexedDB storage, and then use them in the UI. Push messaging. I just want, so first I believe majority of, if not all, web developers and many regular users have strong opinion on this API. So some folks love it, some folks hate all this boring notifications and permission requests about notifications. So the threads on Twitter about this API are quite often with lots of supporters and lots of haters. I don't want to take any side in this discussion. I just want to remind that basically by the signal from our backend, we can run any custom code in the service worker on all the devices where users allowed to show these notifications, with the only limitation, we have to show the notification itself, right? If we forget or do something wrong with calling show notification method, the browser will do it for us, just to make sure that user is aware that something is happening in background. Maybe again, application is not open, the browser is not open, but still service worker is doing something, and it's crucial for user to let know about this. So what's left? Notifications and periodic background sync. Notifications API, well, it's self-standing API, and we can delight or bother users with native to the browsers, and in some cases native to the operating system notifications, even without thinking about PWA, background services, whatever. This is super generic API to show notifications, right? At the same time, it's the best friend of web push API. Basically, push API doesn't have any sense without notifications API. But let's continue the discussion with a slightly different scenario, and let's talk about different use case of notification, which is notification triggers API. I believe this is one of the latest, maybe it's the latest API from this list, and both notification triggers and periodic background sync are about time-based activities, time-based events. And maybe this is the only thing that that is common for these APIs, and the rest is very different. So let's go through these APIs via the table I created to highlight the differences. Timing, even from the name of periodic background sync, for the simplicity, I will call this PBS. We see that it's something about interval-based, right? While notification triggers API, it's about exact time point, timestamp, and it's one-off. Next, what we can do in PBS, any code. We write what to do based on the event we received in service worker ourselves. While notification triggers limits us in a simple scenario to just show the notification. I'm talking about the scenario when we don't require any interaction with the user. With the visibility, PBS is super scary because it's invisible. I mean, we don't have to inform user that something is happening in the service worker. We can, but it's not a requirement. While natively for notification triggers, this is a notification. So looking at these three pieces of the description of PBS. So first, once we register this, it will run more or less forever until we explicitly deregister this, or until user, I don't know, reinstall the browser from scratch. Then we can have completely custom code there, mining bitcoins, you're welcome, and users will never know about this. Well, it's scary, right? This is why, with all extra limitations and configurations, the final decision on sending or not sending this particular event to the service worker and how often to send this is taken by user agent or the browser in case of PBS, while there is no such a restriction for notification triggers. The power of notification triggers, the real power, shows itself in offline mode, right? So we can show notification to the users by sending regular web push request, right? But of course, it's not available offline, while notification triggers give us this possibility. Again, if you wish to build web front-end based alarm clock, this is your API choice. At the same time, PBS is only applicable while for online scenarios. By its nature, and even from the name, we see that it's about syncing, right? So the intention of adding this API to the browsers was to give the possibility to developers to silently update the application itself, application shell, or the data it consumes. And of course, this update can only happen while the device is connected to the internet. This is why the event will come to you, to the service worker on devices of your clients, only in online mode. Furthermore, one more restriction, this will come only for this when the user is on the same network, Wi-Fi or cellular, where this API was registered. This is by design, by the specification, to not leak the personal information, for example, API address of the users. It's quite serious restriction. Continue to chat about restrictions. PBS requires explicit permission, one more annoying permission request, and one more super strong requirement. The app should be installed. Luckily, thanks to Web App Manifest, we know how to install web applications now, right? How to install PWAs, and more users are aware of this functionality. So it's slowly becoming something regular, right, in the user experience. For notification triggers API, the generic notification permission required. So if your users gave it to this particular service, for example, for web push, consider you have this for notification triggers also. Let's have a look now at a couple of code examples. So this is super simplified pieces of code just to show you like the basic structure, maybe the basic scenarios. And we always start with the feature detection. So this is absolutely a must-have. This is good manner. This is best practice for pretty much every API from PWA family, and the PBS is not exception here. I believe in majority of the scenarios you will start registering of this synchronization in your main JavaScript code. So this is why I call this imaginary file main.js. And well, we call register function of periodic sync object of our service worker registration. We gave it a name update content, and we as developers provide only one parameter called min interval. Basically, we ask the browser to send these events to all devices subscribed to this sync, not more often than. But what about the code itself? What we can do based on event we received, if we are lucky to receive this. So you remember how many limitations and requirements we have, right? But if our service worker is really lucky to get this periodic sync event, we can do really whatever we want. And in my sample, I call this function updates content. So maybe we build a web-based Twitter client, and we, with some cadence, want to update the feed of the tweets of for this particular user, and do this in the background. Why? Just imagine user opens the application, and without, instead of spinner, instead of saying something like loading, they see more or less fresh content. But why I have this comment here, sync before you sync? Because again, even with all these restrictions we have as a part of API specification, we can do even step further in taking care of our users. And for example, before doing anything, we can use corresponding APIs to check the connection type. Maybe if we plan to download something bulky, maybe we want to do it only over Wi-Fi networks. Or maybe users use data saver mode, and then I think the good manner is to cancel this fetch at all. And after all, is there enough space on the user device to get any new data? So it's not required checks. It's not part of specification, but again, this is part of good user experience. So really good idea to do all these extra checks. Talking about the time, you remember I told that the Twitter feed will be relatively fresh, right? So we are not talking about seconds or minutes in for this periods of time when our service worker can receive this periodic sync events. No, it's absolutely not about these timings. So in the best case scenario, we can get 12 hours. Might sound like something too long, right? But on the other hand, with all the power of this API, we really don't want to overuse it. We don't want to overuse CPU, memory, network bandwidth of the users. This is why the timing is quite, let's say, restrictive and protective for our users. And it depends. It really depends on the artificial index called engagement score in the browsers. And this index is quite simple in calculations. I mean, I don't know exact algorithm, but the idea is very simple. The more often user interacts with your application and the longer interactions are, the better your engagement score. So basically, browser tries to do the best guess if the user really interested in your application, if it's a good idea to give some extra resources to your app. So it seems like fair play here, right? Notification triggers. Again, it all starts with feature detection, and on the same slide you can see just a demo of web push notification, how that looks on Windows 10, and it's in the mode when this native web notification is self-standing. We can also integrate it with operating system's notification center, and this will look differently. And back to the code, we specify particular time in form of timestamp, and in my example this is 5 seconds from now. Then the method called show notification is pretty similar to the one we have in web push API, for example, or like it's part of notification API. With one addition, we also provide this time trigger, and in my particular example, 5 seconds since this registration, regardless of connection state, if a user will be offline or online, regardless of the running application itself, and regardless of the visible part of the browser is on the screen, the notification will appear. So in this experiment, if in 5 seconds from running this code, you manage to turn off your internet, just throw away your cable or turn off Wi-Fi and close the browser, you will see those notifications still. So this is the power of notification triggers. And one interesting feature of this API is it requires service worker to run, but you see in the simplest scenario, we don't have a single line of the code in service worker itself, right? So if our intention is just to show the notification, we don't use service worker in terms of putting extra code there. But of course, we can extend the functionality, and we can somehow process the user interaction. And in my next sample, I try to somehow silly reproduce the behavior of periodic background sync in using notification triggers API. In that case, we will require explicit interaction from the user side. So it starts the same feature detection. We can provide the tag, just custom name to understand, because we might have multiple periodic background syncs, multiple notification triggers. So let's call this one update content. Let's set the time like tomorrow, but the same time. And then in our service worker, we can add particular code to run the same or similar function about updating the content. But of course, in that case, we can run this code only after explicit user interaction, only after receiving event called notification click from our user. That means that users will see the notification, and if they click corresponding button, we can have list of actions in the notification. We can, for example, launch the application and do the stuff we want. Okay, what's about availability and particular behavior of this and that APIs in different browsers? I have long answer for you. So it depends on many criteria, and well, you can get all the information in details on these well-known resources, what's available where. But I have shorter answer for you. This is part of big PWA family, and don't forget about what P means in this acronym. It's progressive, and it's nothing but about progressive enhancement idea. This is why I emphasize the need to do feature detection, and also I emphasize the need to think about all the APIs which are part of background services or PWA in general, like something that is not crucial for your application, something that might improve this, but if you want to target like big part of web audience, don't rely on these functions. Don't build your core functionality over this. I mean, if you are lucky to target only particular browsers, you can do this, but not in the big picture. So let's sum up. The big goal of all background services and all PWA story in general is to reach the point where web can do the same what native code can do. And in some cases, for example, in flexibility and let's say gentleness of PBS, what web can do is better than what native code can do. From the user perspective, it's always about finding the balance between features which we put on the user's table versus what we require in return. And by this, I mean all these annoying permission requests, all these privacy and security considerations. So let's say the more advanced functionality we add to the web platform, the more questions it raises, again, about bothering user, about privacy, security. So we are on that stage when all simple APIs already implemented. Now we have to go deeper to find the good balance. For us, for developers, I love the current state. First, everything I mentioned is based on at least drafts of web standards. So this is no longer proprietary things for particular browsers. So it's based on public discussion, based on standard committees, decisions, etc., etc. And the tooling we have for the moment in form of dev tools, in form of supporting libraries is quite good. And what I love the most, that it's just the beginning of a beautiful story of extending web functionalities. To continue the discussion about PWA in general and background services in particular, please join this Slack team. We are thousands of PWA developers, and this is largest place on the planet so far to discuss all these great things. And thank you very much. I'm super happy to answer your questions. Okay, let me stop sharing my screen and I will switch to the chat window to get any questions.
Hello, Mark.
Yes, I'm here.
One question is, so we have a lot of features that are working on Chromium-based browsers. What about Firefox? Do you have any news or any information about the compatibility?
If we go to the list of these background services, what's available, I believe only push notifications from this list. And I haven't seen any signals or progress on other APIs from this list from Firefox side. On the other hand, I haven't heard anything against these APIs. For example, folks who develop WebKit/Safari are more vocal on all this story, and they are not keen on having many of these APIs on the web. So maybe Safari side is the weakest part of all this story. And maybe the most often question I have while presenting about PWAs is push notifications support from on iOS devices, because it works, for example, on Mac OS via Chrome browser on your laptops, but not on mobile devices. Well, I don't have an answer, and I don't see any signals.
Cool. Just one element. Do you have any information regarding the battery impact on mobile devices? Are those services consuming a lot of energy, of a lot of resources while working in background?
I didn't hear you well. What services you mean exactly?
For example, the push notification or the background service.
Well, web push. Let me talk about Android, for example. Web push notifications is a very natural part of the operating system. It's well integrated. So I believe if the makers of operating system do everything correctly, it's not about leaking resources. I mean, of course, definitely some resources are needed to run this, but again, it's the balance between what it gives to the user experience and what it requires in return. At least for the mobile native apps, we don't even think about how much resources we spend on having particular native mobile application ready to receive the notifications, right? So it's something that is we don't care about this. The same for the web. I feel that if it's properly implemented from the browser maker side, from an operating system side, well, it's not about overusing. And again, with all these limitations we have for periodic background sync, for example, it's really challenging to overuse something. I really think that receiving periodic sync event in your service worker is the way is the reason to celebrate. Wow! Finally, we can do something.
Okay, great.
Point. Just to continue the story about how these APIs go to live or don't go. If you take notification triggers, last week there was information about the trial origin of this API ended, and unfortunately folks from Chromium team decided not to continue this. It doesn't mean that this API is gone, is dead. No, they want to have one more, I'll say, iteration cycle on this to gather a bit more feedback. Maybe it's, I don't know, I'm not developer experience friendly. Maybe there is just no interest from the user side to this API. So this is a very flexible flow where we as a developer community are actively involved, So I took part in the Twitter discussion, maybe it was yesterday, about the notification triggers API, where when Alex Russell, who is like father of PWA, mentioned that trial origin is finished and they take some break, I delivered this session about background services multiple times for thousands of the developers. I have to try harder, so I do it. So and still, despite trial origin is over, we can use, we can test and we can play with notification triggers API. It's just the question of setting corresponding flag in your browser.
Okay, thanks a lot. Огромное спасибо. And thanks a lot, Max, for this amazing talk. Thanks a lot, everybody, for the attendance. And the video, the recording is going to be available in YouTube sometime later. We are going to announce in Twitter. So you can follow us and you can share it later with the friends, community, and you can put it in somewhere DVD or VHS cassette. You never know, for the future generations. Thanks a lot, and have a good evening.
Bye, folks.